Order. We have a jam-packed agenda tonight. First, is there anyone here or calling in for public comment this evening? Not today. Very good. Approval of minutes. Have you had a chance to look at those, Karen?
Yes, I do, and I am in agreement with the minutes from last month.
All right, as am I. So that's 2 out of 3. So we can approve the minutes. First up today, we have a facilities update. I've asked people to keep their reports brief because we have a couple of lengthy discussions. But first up is the facilities update from Heather Williams. Can tell us what's going on. Hey, here's Todd.
Do a little bit deeper dive on our work order system?
Yes.
Okay. So that is what I did. No, I'm hesitant. We're good?
Don't be afraid.
Okay, I'm a little bit afraid. All right, in the first slide, and I see I have the incorrect date, but this just gives you just from this fiscal year. So July 1 until we met, I think, on the 13th. So I gathered this on the 13th. So from July to 13th, our fiscal year, this is our real-time staff. So we have 23 buildings in the district, 12 of which are instructional. And our work order system is ML work orders, and that combines with ML schedules. So from July 1 to now, for our team of 12, 12 plus Sean, our head building maintenance mechanic, so 13, we have 11,615 requests for assistance. So our team looks at anything that gets entered into ML as a work order as some adult advocating for the needs of a child. And that is how we consider these work orders, that that drives our workflow. So that's the general volume of what we're looking at. So a little over 11,000 there. And the next slide, oops, it didn't change on mine. This gives you an idea, and this makes lots of sense when you look at it. This gives you an idea from July 1 until now of the amount of requests. So from the Ithaca, the high school building, it makes sense that the majority of requests come from there because I think around 40% of our students are there. So they lead the league, right? 6.7 thousand requests since July, and it could be little or it could be big. And sometimes we don't know what we're going to get into. So there are a lot of these work orders that we can predict that are based on fire inspections. They're based on yearly maintenance. We can plan for them. A custodian or an advocate entering them into our work order system means something got broken at some point, or something needs repair, or something doesn't meet code, or in some way, teaching and learning is negatively impacted. So in moving to the next slide, I gave you 2 heat maps. When we get a work order in, so someone in some building somewhere submits a request. So I hop on about 4 a.m. every morning to see if anything came in overnight. The requests are evaluated and prioritized and then assigned to one of our 13 staff members to go tackle. We check them again periodically through the day, but when our staff arrives at 6 a.m., everyone's queue is fairly full. This shows you the priority level, high, low, medium, and then some that come in as urgent. So in the work order system, we're able to adjust the level based on the urgency, and we do that. But you can see that about 60% are coming in as a very high priority. And for us, we're looking at the high and the urgent, but we also have to do the low and the medium. We have to do them all. So looking at the top map for July, August, and September, You can see that in July, it's mostly light blue with a couple darker patches. That means that it's fairly light. Our fire inspections were in July. Our fire inspections then generate things that need attention. So you see August has quite a few more darker spots. September, the actual students and the adults taking care of them are back. So you can see in September, the workload's getting considerably more. If I skip ahead to January, February, and March, that takes us to the end of usually our winter season. And I'd have to look back and see what happened on February 11th, that the number of requests for help were so significant that one got coded as a red. Like, I guess they ran out of shades of dark blue. So this gives you a little bit of an idea about the ebb and flow of our work year. And this doesn't, it's not a limit. We also, as we walk through, some things get broken in real time. I think I shared with you the last presentation, that we got a call from athletics, and sometimes things just happen in real time. And we have to fix those for safety. So some that we can plan and some that are trickier to plan. The last part, being respectful of your time here, is that in a 10-minute span on the 13th, when I sat down to do this, just in a 10-minute span, we had 6 requests come in. So this was in the afternoon, and they came in from all over the place, and they're for all different things. They could be an event set up for athletics. One was a heating and cooling issue, doors and hardware. The majority of ours are mostly heating and cooling and things like that, and general safety. So in a 10-minute span in the afternoon, those came in and they were assigned. One of them was more emergent. So you'll see the second one down, it came in and it was closed within 10 minutes, that we had a person that hustled right over and took care of it. The second picture that overlays it, I want to call your attention to the dark blue rectangles. The dark blue rectangles, we have everything zeroed out in terms of what our labor costs because we're here doing the work. From July till now, we've spent $582.42 on the things that needed immediate attention. From July till now, an average of $156 a work order. Some of the work orders are free. We can fix them with the things we already have. So there's one in the shot about a light switch was shorted out. We replaced it. We had to purchase some new wiring. We didn't. It depends on the switch. So that one was a $54 expense. The one above it, exit signs are fire code, and it was $226 for that one. A problem in a boiler room was $553. So I share this with you because in taking care of teaching and learning spaces in real time, there is a real expense. And we can budget for the things that we know about, and we can tuck money away based on our historic use. So I've been gathering this for 2 years, but in the moment, the things have to be addressed by our team. So the ones that can be deferred. So if we get a work order and I can prioritize it as either low, I can move it to pending and I can wait. And that means that I can wait until the next budget cycle when I can plan accordingly for that. It's not a danger. That's like in my head, that's how we do it, right? Is it a danger? Is it going to interrupt teaching and learning? Is it a safety issue? Is it a fire code issue? If it's not any of those things and it's a big expense, then we budget for it and then we wait for that July 1. If it doesn't fall into that category, then we need to address it now. So that's kind of our everyday life and our workflow as it starts, at 4 o'clock, assigning these out. The goal is to have them zeroed out every Friday. Sometimes we reach that goal and sometimes we do not. If we have to wait on a cart, or if as food service experience today, I don't know if this ever happened to you at home, you open something up and you think it's going to be a quick fix, and then you find out what's inside it. And, you know, that can delay things, but for the most part, we have moved from the day that I started, the average work order was open 465 days before it was closed, meaning someone asked for help and had to wait a year and a third for whatever reason. And the fact that we are now able to respond in real time or darn close to it, our training and our organization has come a long way. So if this isn't what you meant by talk about the work order system, then I'm open for questions, and I will clean up anything that I ordered.
Thank you. That's just what I wanted to hear about the work order system.
Oh.
And I'll point out that in the past, when I was still working for the district, people had largely given up putting in work orders because they would disappear and they'd never hear from them again. So the very fact, although it seems like a tremendous amount of work orders being put in, it says to me that people are getting some results. And
Yeah.
that's a very nice change. Other people have comments or questions about the work order system?
Yes, thank you, Heather. Because this is definitely important for the community to see, and even our internal community, because at times we have from the students, or if we go to different buildings, we hear from parents, PTA members about different fixtures needed. And as you pointed out, which I'm appreciative of, an adult in the building has to put the work order in so that they know that there's a whole process that goes through with this. Now, if we were to go back to the chart that says work orders status per building, that shows the 23 buildings. It starts with Ithaca High School, I believe, and it ends with Ithaca High School. Is that a different location? Why?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to clarify that. Ithaca High School proper is the main campus. It's also, because it's such a large part, that it doesn't show because there's just dots where it cut off. There's also Ithaca High School Athletics and Ithaca High School Fine and Performing Arts. So down toward, there's a second Ithaca High School at 291, that's athletics. And the Ithaca High School that's 97 is Fine and Performing Arts. That's how they're sort of separated in the system.
Thank you.
I had a question. The administrative, there's 1,400 work orders. What building is that? Or
Where-
is that multiple buildings? It's the third one. It's Ithaca High School in administrative.
Administrative building is the board building next door. Or L building, it has lots of names. Central office, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems high. It's more than DeWitt, which is an entire middle school, and that's pretty small building. Is there a reason that it's so high? Is that historically what it is annually, or is that like abnormally high for a certain reason, or?
I don't know. I would guess that these are the buildings where the work order originates. So because our exec team has proven themselves to be very responsive, there are some people, as Dr. Tripp mentioned, like when she worked here, you're not sure how to get things done. So as people in buildings orient to the work order system, we're getting more done in buildings, but some folks might put in a let's talk, and either Dan or Bob or Zach, someone from the exec team, it might land with them and they might submit the work order on their behalf. So it's separated as the collective in the administrative building has submitted 1.4 thousand work orders since July. Some of them are related to the building, and it might be a room setup. It might be installing or revamping a space into a usable conference room that involves maybe mounting a TV. But oftentimes when folks reach out to the exec team, they submit the work order on their behalf, and then we go back to the original person. We clean up the process a little bit.
Yeah.
It's strict for ML schedules, which is the reservation booking system that everyone uses to book a space. And oftentimes I have to, from my office in the admin building, when I submit on other people's behalf, which is all different buildings, if there's any type of setup, it generates a work. So a lot of those, if you track them, are probably coming from me, and most of them aren't for the building proper.
So would you even consider those work orders?
So no schedules is the scheduling system, and
Yeah.
then put in anything that says like, yes, we need tables at this event, or yes, we need chairs.
Got it.
It automatically flags. I don't even set up the work order, it just automatically moves over to what is it, ML work orders.
Yeah, as a for instance, for that, when our partners in the Special Olympics, they're community partners. So if they reach out and they do an ML schedules request on our end, we still have to paint fields, set up tents, et cetera. So it takes the schedules and it kicks it over to work order. And then we can assign so that when any group, either from within our organization or from the community, when they arrive, things are as they expect them to be. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
In terms of setup, chairs, any TV is run through our administrative building, and that would generate a work order because Master Library covers all.
Thank you. The next question was the Danby Elementary School has 121, so it's like two per week almost, or yeah, two per, is that what it comes out to? One every 3 days? Do you know
There
what they're-
are, yeah, we have, so our partners at campus are headquartered at Danby, so part of that is an office suite. And anything from a water delivery to a toilet that doesn't work to construction turnover, that all goes in through work orders also.
And what about, if we use Danby for storage too? Do
We use it
So-
as transition storage. So like right now during construction, we move things from the E-wing into there until we can move them back.
So
Yeah.
in moving things to and from, a work order is put in.
That's right.
Yeah.
A work order helps us track, like if there's a, for instance, where we have to move something to Danby to store it, that requires usually at minimum 1 box truck and 2 employees. So in order to help us track all of the expenses that are associated with these things, they all go in as a work order. So even something small, like around the tennis court right now, you'll notice the banner is back up around the tennis court, the windscreen. That was a work order submitted by athletics to put the banner up. And that way we know what we've been doing and who's been doing it. So if someone has a particular question about whether it got done, I can pull the work order number and it tells who it was assigned to, when it was completed, all the internal stuff.
How granular is the data? Like when you're pulling up these charts, like can you do like electrical switches, then you can pull up like how many electrical switches were changed out this year that were tied to work orders.
Yes,
Because this is like
it's broad.
it's very broad, yeah.
So we can now, I would say that before we really held tight to this system, then the answer was don't know. Now we can, the searchable categories are really, really micro.
Mhm.
Our admin assistant for our team, her name is Emily Smith, and she's just a wizard. She's like our external brain. She goes over when a work order is completed, she collects the receipt before we pay, writes the work order number down on it, and then takes the amount spent and puts it in the work order. So we know what we spent and we know where it went. And the goal of that is to make sure that we're not just going out and buying parts, that we have what we need.
Mhm.
I think that one of the things that was a little bit of a kick in the teeth in terms of our inventory is that the say, for instance, for plumbing, right? You might have had just all these fixtures in your inventory. And then when the lead levels are changed, none of those fixtures are now usable because they're not going to meet the new standards. So if you install them now you're going to have a problem with your water. So for the most part, we're really careful. We have on hand what we need. We've gone through it. We know what equipment it belongs to. And if we have to purchase anything, it is tracked down to the penny.
And then how long have you guys been using this system? And it sounded like before you weren't doing a great job tracking the work orders? It was just kind of, they weren't even work orders being submitted?
Yeah. So I only have information from July 1, 2022, because that's when I started in this position. To my knowledge, and Emily, or someone else might know, I think the ML system has been in place in the district for quite a while. I think 2018. I don't think it was being used with fidelity. But I am very, like, I like to know every little detail and I like to keep track of every little thing. So we are using it with fidelity so that we know right down to the penny where everything is.
Yeah. Is there any ways you can kind of leverage the technology and the data to create like efficiencies? Like you're looking like year over year where it's like, okay, we've got 11, was it 11 people that do maintenance?
12.
12? So that was like under 3 work orders per day per person, something like that? Like, are you tracking like year over year? And yeah, are there ways that we can like, use this data to be more efficient?
Yes, that is, we have team meetings quite often. We also have a monthly staff meeting with maintenance. They look at the data, they have access to it. And what they've come up with is, instead of waiting, I think there was a reactive approach. Something broke, we better go fix it. For the most part, the team looking at this and looking at as much historical data as we can get, set up something called a PM, which was also part of ML. It's a preventive maintenance schedule. And they said, based on what we're doing, we can set that, and that way we can service everything either before it breaks, or we can listen and hear and see that that's going to be short-lived.
Mhm.
So the staff themselves can create and did create those schedules based on looking at all of this and just saying historically, what's breaking where, what's the useful life, what can we do to extend the useful life, and what can our vendors do to help us understand our information to plan better.
Is there like industry standards that you can use to kind of like benchmark the productivity of your team? So it's like, I don't know what the math is, but let's say it's like right now they're averaging 3 work orders per day. Like with property management, there's a ton of data. So we know that, the average work order, the average maintenance guy should be able to get like 6 work orders done on average per day. So if
Mhm.
we have a guy or a woman that's doing 2 per day, we know that, it's something that we should take a look at and check out like on the performance. So like, is there national data that like school districts have to kind of like, that we could use to kind of compare to see how we're doing against other districts?
Not that I'm aware of. I also know that we don't always set up a one-to-one metric. Like, for instance, I assigned 2 of our maintenance staff, Marissa and Brian, today to the food service angle. And the 2 of them, that was the work order they got at 6:06 or whatever time it happened to come in. And it involved taking 4 water heaters apart. So the 2 of them, they might average 3 work orders a day closed, but today they had 1 because that's that.
Yeah.
Like you can't get ankle deep in it and walk away. So what happens then is they call around and say, I have these 2 other work orders. So Jaime picked up their outstanding work orders. So for us, it's not a one-to-one in terms of productivity, because some projects take longer time and some, like a light switch, takes 2 seconds. So if our person was changing 2 light switches a day and sitting down, it'd be problematic. But some are short, some are long. So I can look and see if there's data on it. We don't have specialists. So we are a non-trade union folks. So that means that the same people who are doing plumbing are doing HVAC and electrical and carpentry. They are 12 well-rounded, skilled folks.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, and maybe it could be something too, like when I was asking about like how granular you get, like if you can see like, hey, Mike, I don't know if we have a Mike, but Mike's taking 4 hours on average every time he does a work order for a faucet, it takes him 4 hours. And that should, historically take, I don't know, 30 minutes or something. Obviously there's always, every situation is
Yeah.
different, but like, that's one of the things that we were able to do with our property management business is kind of like, look at like specific work orders and categorize them. And, there was, definitely some people that were, it doesn't take 4 hours to change out a light bulb, So I
I
agree
think
with-
I don't even need the software to
Right.
have
Yeah.
that information, to be
Yeah.
honest. That's a management piece, and we are aware of it, but it's not necessarily software related. But because I'm into data, I could find a way to to probably get that.
Okay.
And I think the light bulb example is a good one, Todd, because everyone knows it takes how many psychologists to change a light bulb, is
But
it,
the light
Adam?
bulb has to want to change itself.
The Adam,
Oh, good.
light bulb has to want to
Has
change.
to want
That's
to
the-
change.
So I'm sure Heather would be happy to go over
Yeah,
this
yeah,
with you
yeah.
in more
Sorry for
detail.
getting like too into
No,
the weeds. So.
No,
my ulterior motive, obviously, perhaps obviously, in asking her to bring us this today, is we get lots of contacts from people who are concerned about things. And it's good to know that we can say to them, has a work order been put in?
Mhm.
Yes or no. If it hasn't, you need to do that so it can get in the queue to be dealt with. And we may still follow up with you, of course, but it's good to know that what the process is.
and we recognize that also as a divide and something to overcome. And we're working toward being able to have postable QR codes so that when someone notices something, they do speak up. And maybe they're not, maybe the work order system isn't like their thing, but usually QR codes have a pretty high response rate. So that's another step that we're taking to try and get as many needs met as possible. Like we can fix any problem that we know about,
Yeah,
but we can't fix the ones we don't know about.
I'm thinking the only thing that may be missing is feedback to the person who gave the work order, and you may have this in. You may have, we've assigned your issue a medium priority. We should be getting to this within the next 2 months or whatever, based on, I don't know if there's
Yeah.
an opportunity for something like that, but
There
I
is
will
and
leave it
there
to
is.
you to figure it out.
There isn't in the software, but I will say that our team has learned that everybody knows it feels bad to throw something out
Yeah.
into the ether, right? And not hear back. So like one of the masters of that is Travis Gordonier. He'll get a work order and he'll meet with a person, get the details, and then say, here's the timeline. And if anything interrupts that timeline, he'll circle back and say, hey, this popped up and I had to handle it, but I didn't forget. And I think that most of our staff are really working on that, that one-to-one feedback. There isn't anything in ML that will kick that back to the user, but our own staff is really trying to make themselves visible and responsive, because we all know it doesn't feel good to not know your answer.
Right, or to be stressed out because your light bulb has been out for 6 months, that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
well, that would
Okay.
be stressful.
Well,
Yeah.
there might be something in ML because when you schedule a location, if you want to reserve a location, it does come back to the individual an email that says that you have scheduled something and someone will respond to you. So,
It does right now in ML. So yes, thank you. There's an opportunity to clarify here. For the most part, all work orders are generated by the building custodians and facilities staff. So someone might go to, say, Lena, who works here, and say an email, I have a problem in this. Lena gets confirmation and Lena can follow up on it, but the person who asked Lena to submit it can't. So there is a loop-ish.
Yeah.
But I'm sure we can work to find a better way to do it.
Okay.
and I do want to acknowledge that in the presentation, the last slide just shows like a spreadsheet of all of the granular items there that they could probably sort by.
Mhm. Yeah,
Thank you, Heather.
yeah, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Our next on our agenda is, let's see, the monthly report from campus. And I've asked for a little different format. We'll see how it goes this time.
Thanks. Yeah, so, we just, we put together a very brief, kind of update, from last month. Couple of pictures on the top. I know you said pictures weren't the main thing, but couldn't resist putting a few on. So, I'll go ahead and get into it. So as I think we all know at this point, many stages to the 2019 kind of capital ref broadly. Most of them are in the process of closeout. Phase 2 jumping straight to phase two, is nearing closeout. Actually, some contracts have been closed out. Others, there's still some punch list items remaining. Some of that punch list we're waiting on summer for. So the expected completion of phase two with punch list is not till kind of end of summer. EV bus stage one, project is in the process of closeout. 3A1, which is the Enfield roof, is the punch list is in progress for completion. That's imminent. I think they're actually working on some of the punch lists today and possibly they'll finish tomorrow. But that's real soon. Moving through the phases, we also have a upcoming phase for next summer at Enfield, which will be doing some upgrades to the domestic water system. We'll be installing UV disinfecting system, so the water will no longer have to be chlorinated. New pressure tanks to keep the, because they're on a well at Enfield, to keep the pressure more consistent throughout the building. So that's this summer. Phase 3B2 is currently at SCD for review. We expect that back and to get on the street for bid this fall. 3A2, which is the window replacement at BJM. There's a few punch list items remaining. That's would also consider that expected completion imminently for that phase. Also, same with Fall Creek emergency repairs. That's essentially done. We have a couple punch list items remaining there. I would say also imminent for that one. Any questions so far?
I'll ask one because it's timely for those of us who've been getting some letters. Does the upcoming BJM renovations happen to include bathroom improvements, to your knowledge?
For 3B2, no, 3B2 does not include bathroom renovations at BJM.
Okay, thank you. We'll have to
Well,
look
just
into
to
that.
provide
It's-
some more information, this is a result of the 2019 capital project.
Yes.
And at that time, it was not, we were not informed or about any bathroom renovations. So this is an update of what's
Yeah.
currently happening in 2000, from 2019 capital.
Yes, yep, yeah. We have ongoing discussion about upcoming for possible future ref. Yeah, many moving parts there of, yeah, target rich environment for future projects.
But yet the emergency repairs for Fall Creek was the crash into the building last year.
Yes,
That we had probably some excess funds that we designated for the repair of that building.
that's right. All the 2019 ref, every dollar wasn't earmarked for a specific project. So, the benefit of doing it that way is if there is an elevator breaks down, we can incorporate that into a construction project to renovate that elevator, or in this case, you know, obviously a traffic accident, to get those repair done through cap project dollars. Yep. So I'll move on to our active, what I'll call our primary active phase of construction currently, which is 3B1. And several sites, we have BJM, Boynton, Enfield, and high school are the kind of different sites we're working on in 3B1. At BJM, since last update, we have installed the motorized shades in the library. They're they're the tall windows you can't reach by hand, so they have remote operated blinds on those. At Boynton, the remaining work that we have is scheduled for this summer. We're gonna replace the kitchen hood. And also put in a new floor trough that will allow some new cooking equipment for the chef and program that the school's been desiring to use for some time. So plan on having that completed this summer. Enfield, again, not actively working there right now. This summer, we have the facade restoration on the exterior. There is some toilet room renovations at Enfield, kind of near the library wing. We are they're getting fully gutted and rebuilt. ADA compliance, a number of upgrades to those. Excuse me. And at the high school, where we have quite a bit of work going on. If you drive by down Lake Street, you probably see there's foundation works going on for the STEM addition. They're actually planning on pouring concrete early next week for a big section of that. Also, the structural reinforcing on the inside of the renovation space is complete now since last update. And they're continuing in the kind of what I call the renovation area of the STEM E-North, but inside the existing footprint, a lot of MEP, what I call MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing installations are ongoing in there. So a lot of those going in. Also an area at the high school in area H, we're working through replacing all the unit ventilators in area H. So that's ongoing. We are expecting to get those fully swapped out before summer recess begins in area H. So any questions for 3B1? This is our current primary phase of construction. Actual slide. And a couple of photos there too. You can see, yeah.
I will take that as a no. Thank you, Travis.
Sure. Thank you.
And next, we're going to move things around just a tiny bit and start with the 2025 capital project scope. And then we'll move on to cooling at Ithaca High. We have Tetra Tech's own Chris here with us.
Good evening. I guess it's evening, right? Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
So this presentation is to talk about the newest iteration of considering what a capital project might look like for a 2025 referendum vote. As you'll see in the schedule, we've been talking about this for some time. This is just a quick update on where we stand today in March relative to your budget vote coming up soon. I'll point out that that green line that represents communications to the voters starts after that budget vote. This meeting notwithstanding. We also have a period of time represented by that blue bar with the star that is the planning for the board resolutions that are the standard and regulated resolutions that need to occur 45 days before the vote date, which at this point is early December. So we're working on confirming the scope. So just any questions about the schedule and kind of where we are in that process?
Well, just to stress that in the past, we've done capital project vote on the same day as budget vote. This year, we've decided not to. We've decided to push it forward to December. Therefore, there won't be a capital project vote on May 20th, 2025.
Great point. Thanks. This is a slide to remind us that construction cost escalation over the last 5 years or so has been at least 5 to 7%. In some years, it's been double digits post-COVID, and that hasn't really, come back down. But we find that construction costs are escalating faster than your budget. I'm not sure if your budget is increasing by, 7 or 10% a year. But that's a dynamic that we try to keep our eyes on. And so over time, if you see some of the numbers increasing, this is why. If you see also that $12.5 million a year or so, based on Ben Maslona, your fiscal advisor, who did a presentation a few months ago, is based on, kind of a current estimate of what your budget is and 7% of that. So that number will change over time as well. Okay. This slide represents a different way of looking. We had these double donut things going, right? And it was a lot and it was confusing. So I'm trying to boil things down into a different type of presentation.
We have a pyramid now instead of
Yes.
double donuts.
Yes, we're going from donuts to pyramids. So and this is attempting to reflect conversations that happen at OACM meetings and, these facility committee meetings as well. And attempting to distill what I'm hearing as priorities from the group. And, I offer this up for conversation. So the way this is intending to describe what a capital project might be starts with a base amount that seems to, over recent months, have consistently been supported in terms of ideas that the district would like to include in their next capital project. That includes roofing at various buildings, some wellness improvements at BJM. Some of that is structural and some of that is to increase accessibility. HVAC improvements, and that's a geothermal system that we will look at some numbers in the next segment of the presentation. Some abatement, which is primarily for flooring. So that's in the high school and in Caroline. These are floor tiles that are starting to come up. This is work that had been done, sort of on a regular summer basis, but hasn't been done in some recent summers. The science is the Boynton Middle School and DeWitt Middle School science rooms that we showed some photos of in recent meetings that have been recommended for upgrade, and playground renovation at BJM. So those are what I've been hearing as consistently the highest priorities. That totals around $31.3 million, approximately, based on estimates that Campus Construction Management and Tetra Tech have collaborated on to create budgets for that. The next tier includes fire alarms and paving at Cayuga Heights, more wellness suites, more HVAC work. This is to improve controls systems at Cayuga Heights and BJM, which I believe are still on old pneumatic systems, and the charging infrastructure out at the transportation center. There's a little asterisk next to that. That amount can change depending on how many chargers you actually want to install up front. Okay, so we've submitted a package to SED for the full system. You can choose to bid less than that if you'd like. So that $4.6 million can modulate a bit. Also, that is an upfront cost that you would need to bond for. You should expect to receive some rebates for that work. There are incentives out there at the state level and at the federal level. As you might be aware, there's some volatility in federal incentive funding. So we will be keeping an eye on that. That's why I haven't given a number for that, because it's dynamic at the moment. The next tier, so adding that group of work would bring a referendum up to just shy of $45 million. Then there's another tier that includes more wellness suite upgrades, more HVAC controls upgrades, and addressing an issue at the Boynton Middle School Gymnasium. If you've been in that gymnasium recently, you might remember the floor finish being relatively splotchy because the finish is coming off of it. So that's an item there that responds to the water that is causing that floor finish to deteriorate. And that would total, just above 49 million or so. Do you have any questions about these items or additional items like BJM bathrooms or anything else?
Well, I have one procedural question slash maybe general question. I thought I got the sense when we met last time in November that we were going to have some different tiers of the capital project, and I think we were talking about different priorities that we wanted to have for the different tiers, and one of them was kind of like a bare bones one, which I mean sounds funny to say for $30 million. And I think it was 29, I saw that it was 29.9 million. It didn't include the playground for BJM. I just see that got added on. And then our base one was bumped up to 31.3 million. So I had a couple of questions. I guess one question I had was, how the base one got changed originally from the last meeting. The other question that I have, I guess, is about, okay, I wanted to know how the base one was changed. Oh, I guess I wanted to know if we were sort of like having a change in our philosophy. And I guess I was thinking about the RFP that we're going to have coming out, where we're going to be sort of looking at everything to kind of get a sense of, are we going to be using our buildings the same? Are we going to be doing things in the same way? And just having the thought that maybe waiting to get the results of an RFP to get a better sense of how we're going to use all of the buildings, maybe before we add a playground, which seems kind of like something that I definitely like to see happen at BJM. And I know that it's something that people in the community have been asking about. But then also, like, we've been getting requests about bathrooms and things like that. And, to me, like, the bathrooms seem more utilitarian and kind of necessary. And we had talked a little bit last time about if we're going to go out and ask the community for $30 million, in light of recent events and financial feelings in the community, that we were going to sort of try to keep things at a functional utilitarian baseline capital improvement project. So I just wanted to raise that question and get a sense of that change.
Thanks. Yeah, I will try to address your comments in order. So the BJM playground was added during one of these meetings by Sean Eversley Bradwell. So that's why I put it on the list. The base and the $14.2 million ad swapped a couple items based on direction that was given to me from the district at the recent OACM meeting, to move infrastructure at transportation up and move all of the science classrooms down into the base. So that vibrated a little bit. Also, I did another check-in with campus construction management about construction costs, and they revised some of their numbers. So that vibrated some of the numbers as well. So that hopefully that explains, I think, all of the adjustments from that 29 number to the 31 that we see today. In terms of the RFP results, I'm at your disposal in terms of what schedule you would like to be on for a referendum. I think what you're getting at is reviewing the results of that study to inform what buildings you invest, capital project.
Yeah, and I mean,
and so absolutely willing to be part of that process and respond to it.
Yeah, and just to give an example, I mean, we have no idea I don't even want to hypothesize what's going to happen with the RFP, but even just hypothetically imagine 200 more students were going to move from one place to BJM, for example. And then, we were trying to think like, okay, well, now with that new number of students in that particular location, if we were going to make a playground, we would want to make an even bigger playground because there's 200 more people coming. So, I mean, that's kind of the line that I'm thinking of in terms of like some things are really, we need to do them, the roofs, let's say I'm going to add bathrooms as something that I think we really need to do.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about it. I'm only responding to community concern about it. And it sounds like it's an important thing. Electrical grids, those kinds of things, right? So that's just sort of like one phase, but maybe a playground is a little bit more complicated. So, and I just noticed the difference from the last meeting, and that's why I bring it up.
Yeah. Well, you're thinking about the size of a playground based on a significantly different population, is good thinking. And we would need to look at the whole building. You might need a bigger cafeteria. You might need another gymnasium station. You might need other infrastructure within that building, depending on how many kids you're going to be bringing there. So it's a good thought. And that's the kind of study that I think that RFP would support.
Thanks.
And I think we're still crafting the capital projects
Absolutely.
and weaving things in and out. The priorities haven't changed. They're the last three columns here, the facility improvement, health and wellness and sustainability, because at last week's OACM meeting, we discussed that this continues to be the focus. And Sean added the BJM playground. That was a result of like BJM coming to the board about 2 or so years ago, asking that their playground be improved and all. And at that time, we were under discussion with Fall Creek, I believe, when that whole design was coming in. So it couldn't be part of the 2019 capital project at that time. So that's why we made sure we're putting it in place. So it's still so many moving targets. And I think we discussed that at OACM last Thursday, that there are just too many moving targets at times, and we don't have the results from the study as of yet, but to start to get some discussion in place to solidify things.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks for that. And to your point, bathrooms have been talked about in a lot of detail, locker rooms, if you've been in the high school for years and years as well. So what is on the list today or on the list tomorrow varies over time, depending on the priorities of, the folks that are making the decisions about it. So yeah, as Travis said it well, target-rich environment for capital project work.
I'm going to make my usual pitch for frugality here. And my argument is that there are many different ways to do a playground. What we've heard about the BJM playground is that it's lacking a climbing structure, a large climbing structure that many of the other playgrounds have. Now, we could spend 1.4 million for planning and designing and getting some playground equipment. Or it seems like we could go to a playground equipment catalog and buy a playground structure that's equivalent to the ones that we have at Bell Sherman or South Hill, and have that installed without all of the, what shall I call it, additional work and what's a nice word for slowing a process down, of bringing in Cornell professors to talk with the students about what they need and then taking a year to get feedback on that. I'm troubled by project creep on some of these things, and the playgrounds are the main thing that brings this to the fore for me, is that, we want the kids to have decent playgrounds. Of course, we want them to have safe playgrounds, but I'm not sure they need multi-million-dollar playgrounds. So and I can bore everyone by bringing in lots of pictures from different playgrounds around the community. And I know we could have fabulous ones, but do we have to have fabulous ones at this point? And I'll point out once again that the most expensive private school in our community doesn't have an elaborate playground. It has trees and pine cones and dirt and gravel. And people seem to be perfectly happy to send their kids there. So that's me on one end of the scale. And I just want to toss that out there again. And yeah, that's getting at a little bit at the nitty gritty at this point. I'm not opposed to some playground renovation at BJM, but I would like us to approach it differently than we have been most recently. And I'll continue to make my argument against the implementation of the Fall Creek playground, because I think it's excessive and expensive.
And I think we need the BJM community to definitely weigh in on the playground.
There's no danger that any of our communities won't weigh in.
We know that.
Yeah.
Is the 1.4 million for like a brand new playground? Is it like ripping out what's existing and putting in something new? Or is this 1.4 just for like an addition? And what it, yeah, I'm just trying to understand the number.
That is estimated to be a significant renovation of that playground. We haven't designed it.
And then before we go to the number, we
Right,
need to
that-
do a
that's what- that's-
comparison to what was spent on or is being spent on prior playgrounds too.
Can you better define significant renovation? What does that mean?
I think for the budget that has been created, one could replace all the equipment. The process of, it's a question about the quality of the playground, in terms of the quality of the equipment, in terms of longevity and nuts and bolts, the safety of it, and what it offers your students. So it is a number that could change in response to what you want to do with that playground, how much or how little you want to do.
Are there elements that are currently unsafe?
I believe there are, so there have been some reports. I know Heather's team has been addressing those reports. I'm not sure exactly where we stand at the moment, in terms of, the individual pieces and parts that are, that break down and are fixed and parts are replaced and things like that.
Heather, are you able to comment on that real quick? Because I'm just curious and I don't want this to like.
We do not have any outstanding items. Playgrounds are inspected, like that's part of state law, and we get a visual report of those. We don't have any items outstanding on any of our playgrounds.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is the playground's currently safe. We want to create a playground that has more options for the kids.
One that I would say would provide a space for your students that has more options, more shade, more developmentally appropriate structures and areas. And that's what a comprehensive design of a playground gets you. You could certainly just replace a piece of playground or two. Sure.
Have you guys actually figured out like what the developmental piece, like what is missing?
So so Dr. Lobach, who has been into this meeting before, can certainly articulate with more clarity than I can at the moment, although
Yeah.
I could come back to you as well. And talk about those benefits to students, because that's what she studies, and is getting recognized for Cornell on April 8th for her design of Fall Creek Playground specifically, and the participatory design process that was implemented there. So places, so I'll give you a couple examples. Places where a small group of children, 1 or 2 or 3, can exist with some level of perceived privacy. Of course, we take safety very seriously. Feels very different than a wide open play space with some structures in it. For example, you could imagine a different feeling and a different way of being out in that space that can satisfy the needs of different children. So what we want to do is provide a variety. So kids that are very energetic and want to, get that more aerobic fitness kind of things have those opportunities. The kids that don't need that and don't want that have opportunities to be quiet, to look at nature, to read a book, be comfortable if it's hot out especially. Those are some examples of the type of how the design of a playground can make that space more diverse for different types of students and meet your student body more accurately.
If I may jump in real quick, just for those that are interested on the board, who were not present, maybe last year, year before, I was not present, obviously. But a group of families got together, and one gentleman in particular put together a very extensive evaluation and slideshow assessing the differences of every single playground at all of the elementary schools, with pictures and measurements of field space and area to run around, and the types of structures that kids were able to play on at each school. They did that from BJM when they were first advocating for a different playground. So I think that it would be most useful. I would
Yeah.
recommend taking a look at that. I think it was, I'm sure it wasn't perfect, and I'm sure some people didn't like it, but I found it extremely helpful to just get an understanding of, the significant variation from one school to another about what they have access to. And it'll give you an idea of the kinds of things that are important to BJM families, at least at that time, about what they're hoping to see and changes that they like to see in the playground. So
Yeah.
we can probably find that, and I'm sure I can find it, but I don't know how we would.
Yeah, no, that'd be really helpful.
Okay.
As Jill said, this is an iterative process and it evolves, and we're still in process and trying to figure out what the right fit is of scope items.
One of the things we talked about at OECM was different options as far as when this comes up for a vote. And, one possibility is, of course, to include everything at 49.1 or whatever approximation there is of that. The other possibility would be to present it literally as options to, are you interested in supporting the base of 31.3, yes or no? And then the next part of the question would be, would you be interested in adding these other things for an additional 14.2? And then finally, would you be interested in adding these other things? So rather than collapsing it all, to have it split up and people can see at what level they're interested in doing a capital project, and knowing very clearly about what we all would be getting for our money. So do people have thoughts on that as a strategy of different ways of presenting this as opposed to the specifics in each?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I don't, have the answer necessarily, but I just wonder, like in a base model, if there's like a type of playground renovation that we can do that would satisfy some of the terms of what was brought, to the attention of the board, that isn't 1.4 million, but maybe is, some sum of money that would definitely like spruce up the playground in a temporary fashion. And then maybe in the 44.5 or the 49.1, like the full $1.4 million playground renovation goes into a higher tier, in the sense of, if we're going to spend more money and ask the community to spend more money, and the bottom tier is the most essential things like roofing and, not that exciting stuff. Maybe that's a way, to look at it, to separate that out and have a different level at the different tiers so that we can meet the criteria and make some substantial, significant improvements, but maybe not 1.4 million. That's just a thought.
As I was saying before, we also need to do a comparison of what what it has cost for playground improvement in the past. I don't think it's just sprucing up, because I know for accessibility, they wanted playgrounds to meet the needs of different children and different learning development too. And that's where the community's involvement in Fall Creek Playground, they were ensuring that that was met too, so. I'm not sure I'm keen on the add-on options method.
You'd prefer to go with everything or some portion of
To-
everything?
Yeah, to have it outlined, we would know what we're asking the community for in a capital project referendum. We've never done in the past, like the detail line by line item. in any requests, but we know what it is because that's what was presented or will be presented to the board to vote on.
I'll give a couple pieces of feedback. One, I think that I appreciate your idea about, maybe the base includes a basic renovation or just some upgrades, minor upgrades to the playground, and then a higher tier, if we do that, has more. There's complexity there that might confuse people. So simplicity sometimes is one's friend. And along that line, doing one proposition that is a base, and then probably just one other proposition that is, if you want to do more, it also keeps it simple. For other districts that we've seen, it's typically been 2, 3 tends to get a little complicated for voters to really understand accurately. So I just make that suggestion. So I guess if I'm asking a question, the question is, how would you like me to move forward in terms of any additional information you need or revisions that the group sort of agrees on and that I can move forward with?
I just had one point of clarification. I thought, and just correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I misunderstood, but I kind of thought that, and maybe you're saying the same thing, we were going to agree as a board, what package we wanted to put in front of the community, and the community was going to vote on, but the community wasn't going to choose among the 3. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're correct.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
correct. Okay. So we as a board have to decide the scope and size of the project. And then when it gets in front of the community, there won't be a menu. It'll be just, this is the project, and then they get to vote.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to
Yeah,
confirm.
it'll be a yes or no. Do you
Right,
want?
okay.
Yeah.
So we have to decide as a board how we want to come up with our final iteration that we're going to put forward.
Correct.
Okay.
And we, at one of the board meetings, we discussed bringing it back to the board.
Right.
For further discussion.
Yep.
As to how we're proceeding.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 board members here today. We could certainly bring it to a full board meeting if this is, I like this format. I think it provides a lot of specificity for people. Are people happy with this being what goes to the full board for possible weak approval for moving forward? I think we're going to move largely to our budget and put this on ice for a while after this next iteration. Does that make sense to people that this go forward to the full board, or do you want to see some?
For continued discussion.
Yes, but also with the notion that Tetra Tech and others can continue to put some effort into this. I mean, these are priorities, all of them. And certainly within the base are the highest priorities, as we've talked about over the last few months.
And knowing that BJM restrooms have become another addition, then how is that evaluated or looked into before it comes on here? Because we've received multiple requests saying that that needs upgrade and update and total renovation as soon as possible. So how do we, what steps are needed to proceed that way?
Well, we could certainly outline some assumptions about the work to be done and put a number to it for your consideration.
I'm nervous about the process there because we could be going up to December with groups of people saying, this is a problem. Yeah.
That's correct. And so I'm looking to this group for.
Right, I know.
No, and realistically, they can say it's a problem. It's just what is the process that we have within the district to determine, all right, is that a level high priority
Right.
or is it a medium or low?
Right, so at this point, it could be largely a work order sort of situation. Then we don't jump from, this is a problem too. It's in the
Right,
capital
I agree.
project.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah. So an assessment needs to be done to see if, okay, do we need to do
What,
something?
what are the problems? How much would they cost? So I think that's
Yeah.
where we are. If you're in agreement
Yes.
with the BJM bathrooms, I agree. They need work, but how do we go about it and how do we pay for it?
Agree.
Okay. All right. I see people coming in. Look at that. It's 5:56. Tell us about cooling.
All right.
Chris.
Thank you, Emily. So we have talked about providing cooling at Ithaca High School for several years. The board decided as part of the 2019 bond referendum that Ithaca High School shall receive cooling. So I'm starting here with a little bit of background. I'll move through this part quickly and we'll get to the analysis. Basically, this is a floor plan of Ithaca High School. The orange bits were air conditioned prior to 2019 as part of the capital referendum in 2019. The yellow bits, those are A, which is now the Welcome Center, and Area J, which houses your wellness suite, as well as some classrooms. Those were renovated. And during that renovation, those received cooling. Currently, we are in the process of bringing cooling to the blue areas of Ithaca High School. Some of that work has been bid and is in construction. As we were designing the cooling for Ithaca High School, we were in conversation with Cornell University. You may remember that in the year 2000, if you knew about it then, Cornell University put their lake source cooling system into use and started providing Ithaca High School with cooling. An amount of cooling that is only part of what is necessary to cool all of Ithaca High School. I've got a couple numbers up here, 400 tons. A ton is a measurement of cooling. We don't need to understand that other than Cornell's lake source cooling system can provide 400 of them and has been doing so. You have an agreement with Cornell University to provide up to that amount of cooling for so long as the lake source cooling system is in use. Cornell can decide to stop using their lake source cooling system. They have outlaid, it's a significant capital investment to pipe water from the lake to Cornell University. It is the only type of system that exchanges heat between a lake and a college campus that I'm aware of in this country and possibly the world. It's a unique system. You get very, very, very efficient cooling from that system, and you've been getting that for 25 years. The Department of Environmental Conservation is looking at the permits that allow that system to be in operation, and have notified Cornell of a limitation on that. And so Cornell has notified Ithaca City School District that that amount of cooling cannot be expanded at this time. So we were at a point where we had gone through very productive and nearing design and construction process with Cornell University to do that very expansion when this happened. So the team had to pivot. We said, okay, this lake source cooling is no longer an option to bring cooling to those blue areas I talked about. What else can we do? And so this conversation is about those options. Those options are a cooling tower. If you walk around cities or large buildings and you look at the roofs of those buildings, you'll see cooling towers like this unit that's on the left. It's a large box. It has fans in it. It takes the heat that you're pulling out of the building and it rejects it to the atmosphere. You can then, that would only provide cooling for your building. You could then continue to provide heating for your building with the natural gas boilers that are currently heating Ithaca High School, every school in your district except for Enfield, and potentially Caroline might be on fuel oil. So we're comparing that type of system, which is a traditional system, traditionally the lowest first cost system, traditionally the highest energy use system, with another system, which is a ground source heat pump. We are familiar with heat pumps. Those of us that have a refrigerator in our kitchen have a heat pump. It only goes in one direction. It takes the heat from inside the box and pumps it to outside the box. A heat pump like the ones that you see if you travel around our area and you see these boxes, you know, often attached to the sides of houses and buildings. Those go both directions, right? So you're taking heat from inside and dumping it outside in the summer. You're taking the heat from outside, dumping it inside in the winter. That exchanges the temperature with the air. We're proposing to exchange that temperature with groundwater. There is an aquifer that we know about since the Science Center has been using it for several decades when that large expansion was created. There is also a pilot study being performed by utilities for an area over by the DMV and Aldi in that zone that intends to tap into that same aquifer. It's essentially the lake 150 feet down or so, well within the range of access for a geothermal system. So we're comparing these two systems. So I'm going to show you a bunch of numbers. I'm going to lead you through them in these next slides that analyze and compare these two systems to one another. We use a piece of software that is developed by the Department of Energy. It's an industry standard life cycle cost assessment tool. It assumes life cycle costs over a 30-year period. So the question that we're asking in this analysis is, over the next 30 years, let's compare different options for heating and cooling your buildings, right? And these are the two options. I'll point out also Lansing High School has had a geothermal system in combination with a boiler for the last 25 or 30 years. I think it was built in the late 90s. So there are local examples of this as well. Okay. The four options that we considered, and I'm going to try to boil this down and make it as simple as possible because there's a lot of numbers. I'm going to try to lead you through what they mean. So remember that 400 tons that you got from the lake source cooling? 600 tons gets you to, combined with that, gets you to all of Ithaca High School. It needs about 1,000 tons. So 400 plus 600 gets you there for cooling Ithaca High School. So you could design a system that is of that size. That's Ithaca High School with lake source cooling. The next column is 1,000 tons. That is just designing a system for Ithaca High School. Forget the lake source cooling. Maybe, you know, we're not in control of that cooling. So let's just be independent and have our own system for Ithaca High School. And that's 1,000 tons. In conversation with this, we realized when you're doing a system of this size, and you have another building, Boynton Middle School, right there, you can do what is called a district geothermal system and provide cooling and heating to that building as well for an upcharge. Some recent support of that strategy is NYSERDA, which is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. They provide a lot of incentives, some of which Ithaca City School District has taken advantage of and gotten rebates from them. Last week, they issued a program for district geothermal systems because it's generally becoming recognized as a very efficient way of dealing with more than one building. So the 950 tons represents the 600 from Ithaca High School plus about 350 for Boynton. It's a smaller building, you know, than Ithaca High School. So it's about 350. So that's how we get to 950. And then the last column is all in. Let's go big. All of Ithaca High School and all of Boynton on the system. Okay, so those are the four options that we analyzed. We're like, how's it going to turn out? All right. This next bit of information is purely financial. We're looking at first cost in those top two rows, and then with our analysis, looking at a life cycle net savings. So first I'll lead you through those top two. So cooling tower plus gas boilers, that's that more traditional system that we went into this analysis thinking that's going to cost less and it's going to use more energy. We definitely found that to be the case. But you see the rough upfront costs of those for the different sizes. We also, in partnership with campus, came up with some, these are rough order of magnitude numbers. We haven't designed the system. We're making a lot of assumptions. We're trying to be very conservative. But you can see that a ground source heat pump that heats and cools, it does basically the same thing as your cooling tower plus gas boilers, is more expensive. We expected that to be the case. One of the things that we see in this last line is this net savings. So what we're doing is comparing the ground source heat pump, this geothermal system, with the more traditional system. So if you go with the ground source heat pump system at a 600-ton size, over 30 years, we think you'll save about $160,000 over 30 years of operation of that system. Okay. If you provide a 1,000-ton system for Ithaca High School, we think you will start that one again. Trying to say this very clearly. If you provide a 1,000-ton geothermal system, that is not as good a cost standpoint. That's why that number is negative and in red. It means that geothermal system we anticipate will cost you more over 30 years. The flip side of that, you could say, we're from a cost perspective, much better off doing a traditional system in that case. If we were to select that size, we should do the traditional cooling tower and we should just continue on with natural gas boilers. Similarly, if you were to expand that system to Boynton Middle School and design a 950-ton system, we anticipate that you would save some money by going geothermal over that 30-year period, around $400,000. And similarly, if you do the extra large version, that is a complete standalone system, about $100,000 in the red over 30 years. With the accuracy of the assumptions that we're making, we could call that a wash. Okay. Questions about that at this point?
Did you guys analyze air source heat pumps?
Good question. So air source heat pumps, as you're probably familiar with at a smaller scale for houses and other types of buildings that are of a smaller scale are definitely an option. Looking at what the market offers in terms of equipment for larger scale, like this size, air source heat pumps or air to water heat pumps, it's not a great match. The technology and the scale of this project is not a great match. Could it be done? Yes. It would likely not be as efficient as the ground source heat pump and more expensive than a cooling tower plus gas boilers. So we don't think initially from like just a very sort of gut high level that would be your best option. But that's a great question because that is a technology that's out there at a smaller scale and used very well at a smaller scale.
Are there significant differences in the environmental impacts of one option over the other?
That is a great question. Thank you. There are. All right, so the top part of this graph has remained the same. What is added is energy usage. So if you decide to go with a cooling tower and gas boilers in that sort of pinkish color, you would expect to have an emissions level in that orange band below. 11,150,000 kilograms of CO2 emitted by adding cooling at, to the rest of Ithaca High School. You see those numbers there. The line immediately below that, which says ground source heat pump, 30 years, and is in blue and starts with 4,400,000. That is the relative use, or I'm sorry, that is the relative emissions of that system. So you can see it's a lot lower. The net CO2 reduction, which is the next line down, is just the difference between those two. Okay, so you can go across the line, and it makes sense as your system gets larger in capacity, as you move toward the right, you're using more energy. Also, the savings relatively for a ground source heat pump also increase as you increase the size of that more efficient system. There are some metrics here, because like, what is 11 million kilograms? Like, what do these numbers mean? So we tried to convert that, and this is using an EPA greenhouse gas equivalency calculator to bring that into some more familiar statistics. So again, for the staying in the column on the left for the 600-ton system, relatively speaking, if you did a ground source heat pump system, you would have the emissions effect of keeping 49 cars off the road every year for 30 years when compared to doing the traditional system. Gallons of gasoline, homes of energy use are similar metrics. So that's every year for 30 years. That's trying to get the impact of the emissions reductions in some relatable scale to those of us who live in the world.
Does this feel like a big savings to you? No, I'm not being facetious. I
You're
don't.
right where we were at OACM.
Yeah.
You're right where we were.
Yeah. I think that if you had the opportunity to, well, it's a value statement. I'm going to answer that by going through these next two slides. If your value is primarily financial, you would say, we're probably just, let's do the traditional system at the 1,000 tons, and we'll avoid, spending $525,000 extra to do a geothermal system. And it'll be the lowest, it'll be a relatively low first cost and a relatively lower, operating cost over 30 years. The relative emission savings, don't apply that I'm showing for that case. Part of the reason for that is natural gas is about 7 times cheaper than electricity for heating your building. So when we do these calculations, we're trying to overcome that if we're trying to generate an outcome that has a positive life cycle cost result. That makes sense?
Mhm.
So keeping your natural gas boilers is cheaper, but you can see the emissions that come out of that. So if you're conversely starting from a standpoint of combining a life cycle cost that puts you ahead or at least equal, while also offsetting emissions, you would arrive at a different decision, which is what I'm trying to highlight here.
Mhm.
Okay. I don't know if that answers your question directly, Todd, or if you have a follow-up to that I can answer more
No, that
accurately.
answers it. Thank you.
Chris, help me. Why would we consider doing a system without lake source cooling, since we're committed, we have a commitment from Cornell for that?
Cornell can decide to stop using their lake source cooling system.
So if they stop using it, they no longer have to provide it to us.
That's correct, per your agreement. I mean, I don't know Cornell, but they're cooling a lot of their buildings with this system. I think it's I don't know.
How
I think
many?
it's, I think
Yeah.
it's, I think it's unlikely that they will stop using it. They've invested a lot of money in it. It's doing a lot of work for them. It's cooling a lot of their buildings. So I'll just, that's my,
So that's the only reason why
unofficial.
we're including those two options without lake source cooling,
correct.
which we already have,
It
which is
provides you
working
some
well
sort
for.
of insurance against the
Okay.
possibility.
Okay.
Clarifying question,
Mhm.
Boynton right now needs this, or this is more of like, hey, if we're gonna do the geothermal for one, there's economies of scale to do Boynton, but
Good
as of right
question.
now, do we need to invest this money into Boynton?
Good question. Today you don't. You have natural gas boilers that work. They're aging out. They're 10 or 15 years old. I'm looking at Peter. He's our mechanical engineer who's been crunching all these numbers you also have providing cooling at that building. You have an ice storage system, which is a different type of providing cooling. Your staff has recently gotten that back online. It was offline for a number of years and fixed that up. That system is also aging. So this analysis assumes over 30 years, you're going to have to replace that stuff one way or another. You can replace it with a traditional system. You could replace it with a geothermal system.
Okay. That helps.
Or you could not replace it at all right now.
Yeah. Okay. How many days a year do we actually need AC? I'm just curious.
We have recently received a tome of data from Day Automation, who is your building management system provider. It's data for the last year, and we're currently analyzing that relative to the governor's recent mandate on maximum temperatures in classrooms. So the word need is a relative one, and we could define it in different ways. If need is defined as, pick a number, 68. Yeah, you have a need for a lot of cooling. If need is defined as 88 degrees, which is the governor's mandate, in terms of the maximum temperature that teaching and learning can happen in a space, very, very little. In our initial analysis, we haven't looked at all the buildings yet, but little, if any, would be required.
What do we keep our temperature at? Like currently in the summer, not
In the summer?
yeah.
Well, in a lot of,
Or the
in
ice
most buildings,
walls.
you don't have cooling, so it is what it is.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Maybe we could bring in, when you get through massaging that day, temperature data, we could take a look at that
Yeah.
by school. I think it would be interesting for people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. We're working on that. And we'll definitely have that ready for OACM next time to look at some of those.
Great.
analysis. Yeah,
But yet in this scenario, we're talking about the high school.
that's correct.
One quick question, IHS all,
Mhm.
what is that compared to the other numbers, like the highlight?
Yeah, IHS all represents all of the cooling you need for Ithaca High School in that system. You don't need light source cooling. The system that we're talking about in that scenario provides all 100% of the cooling for Ithaca High School.
So it's divesting from the lake source completely.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct.
And one request for these slides, since we always have community members going back and look at it, can you define the acronyms?
Yes.
Thank
Good
you.
point. Thank you. I can do it now for the recording.
Or you
GS,
could put it, and you did say it when we were going through, because I was wondering what BMS was, and you did say it. But if we can make sure that it's
Mhm.
up by the time this presentation is in board docs.
okay. I can certainly make an adjustment there. Thanks.
I was just going to throw just a flashback
Mhm.
to our June meeting last year. Just to put this in as something for us to all remember and consider is that we did unanimously vote as a board that we were going to basically try to commit to taking accelerated action to reduce district greenhouse gas emissions. So that I think when we're considering this, it was something that we had considered as an important priority last year. So just to remember that if we could keep that in mind when we're making the decision, just to be mindful of that.
But yet we also decided some years ago to make sure that a high school is cool.
Oh, no, I mean,
Okay.
we're saying the same thing. I'm just saying if we're going to cool the high school, I'm just putting in the idea that if we could do it in a way that reduces emissions, that would be nice. Of course, cost matters, but we have multiple priorities, I guess.
So I'm new, it's my first year, as everyone knows. I'm really interested to understand like how many days of the year we need AC. Because if we're saying like, hey, we're making this commitment to invest in millions of dollars to cool these buildings, is that because like 5 days out of the year we actually need AC? And I don't know, so I'm just,
We have not yet analyzed Ithaca High School. I'll point out that building is used, I would say, there's others in the room that
During the
probably
summer.
could be more accurate about it, but used through the summer, through
Got it.
more of the year.
Yeah.
So that's probably more relevant at Ithaca High School than maybe any other building, potentially other than BJM. I think that's where you've had summer school recently. So those are the, kind of two priorities from a programmatic standpoint.
And we're not talking about the height of the summer months, but because we've heard from some students and educators and staff that like if you get a hot day in April or May, certain buildings, certain sections don't feel comfortable.
I think the genesis of this from a previous board was basically the response to second floor of G and the second floor of H are hot.
Mm.
They get really hot, just from a high level experiential standpoint and what they were hearing from folks. We're trying to back that up with data, I think, to your point.
yeah,
To get more
that's,
specific about it.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Are we good on that for now, Chris, or do
Okay,
we?
so the piece of urgency is we have bid work with contractors that we need to give them direction on because we bid the work with assuming the lake source cooling. That was taken away after we bid work. So Travis is calling me every week saying, hey, we need to provide direction to contractors. I'll request some review of this. I know it's a lot to take in, and I appreciate if you have more questions. But we are looking to get a direction, even a preliminary direction, I think will help us provide information to contractors so they can either remove work if they're going to remove it or do it differently, depending on which way we go. So hopefully within the next, I request, I guess, by next OACM, if we could receive some direction about how to move forward, that would help us on the construction side.
What do people want to do with that?
So are these amounts already embedded in something that we've voted on before and we're given the approval to? No, so it has to come to the board for vote. Okay, so
Correct.
that means that it would be presented to the whole board too.
Mhm. And so back on the previous presentation where we were talking about the potential capital project, this scope of work is in that next vote.
Oh, for the 2025 capital
That's
project
correct.
referendum.
That's correct. So it's additional work. We need to go to the state to get approval. There's a design process. So it's a significant amount of work to design the system and get approval for it. And to pay for it.
I want to circle back to something you just said. You made a comment about certain buildings and second floors.
Yeah.
Being an issue. Does that mean that we could potentially do a smaller system? And could you go to air source heat pumps? I mean, we've done it on, commercial scale. And you've done it like in zones.
Mhm.
So, I mean, if it's just the second floor of a building, would that be a more economical option? And does that solve a lot of the problem? Like, are we coming up with a solution for an entire building when we really need to be coming up with a solution for like the second floor of buildings? And would that like,
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer, so I'm
Yeah.
just, that's what I'm curious about.
It's for the board to decide if you want to change your goal about cooling Ithaca High School. But to your point about data, again, we can provide data that
Yeah.
says, how hot is hot and how often. And we're working on that.
Yeah, and in that
I
data,
think I'll say that the sort of room by room system, with smaller air source heat pumps, we're a bit down the road in terms of construction to make that economically feasible. Even if it would be to begin with, it creates a lot more opportunities for maintenance. One centralized system, we've heard a request from your maintenance staff to try to go in the opposite direction, actually, to provide central systems to help with that maintenance. I think there's an efficiency benefit to a central system as well. And specifically at Ithaca High School, you have a lot of piping already installed that goes with a central system. So you would be abandoning work that you're doing like right now. If you were to radically change your approach to how you cool that building. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
I'd love to see the data. I think that helps, make a better informed
The
decision.
temperature data? And
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm curious about, again, like, are we creating a
Okay.
system
Yeah.
for an entire building? And we really only need to create a system for the second floor of these buildings. And there's a sunk cost to, the stuff that we've already invested in the infrastructure, but I mean, that doesn't mean that we should pursue that path if there's, a more economical way and efficient way. And I don't know the answer. I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm just posing these questions, so.
we're just about out of time for this evening on this, and I'm wondering how we move forward with getting some of these answers, and I think including the sustainability folks, who I know are going to be very interested in this discussion. I don't know if we want to try to do that as part of a whole board meeting or maybe a special meeting. Anybody have any sense of?
Well, I just know that just thinking about the upcoming board meetings, I think we have a lot of things on our
Right.
plate, just with the budget coming up. Sean and I were talking about that today. So anyway, maybe a special meeting, maybe maybe the next facilities meeting, maybe, I'm not sure. And then eventually it has to go, of course, to the whole board, but for planning and discussion. I'm just not sure we can do it.
Is that too late, next facilities meeting, or do we need to have a special meeting before that to give you the guidance you need? Sure.
Yeah, the next facilities meeting is the 22nd, OACM is the 10th of April. And you said you wanted by the 10th, but knowing that we can't.
Yeah, it's looking like an extra meeting to me. Okay, is that all right with folks? Okay, we'll schedule an extra meeting of the facilities committee to talk about this before the OACM meeting, so we can give them some guidance on what those of us who've been following this feel among these four options is the way to go, and possibly to have some information on what Todd has suggested, so we know whether to include that or not to include that. All right. I'll get back to you. For the next facilities meeting, the next regular facilities meeting, I have that we should have some day automation, the compilation of at least a preliminary look at the temperatures, although we may end up doing that in the special meeting, who knows? And of course, we'll have our usual reports from campus and facilities. And we also have on the agenda talking about the request for air filtration at South Hill School. So those are the things that are on the agenda for the next regular facilities meeting. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. It's time for Finance Committee.